By the time I returned from burying my mother, there was a message waiting for me in my inbox. Please vacate your workspace by the end of the day, Mark. Security will escort you out. HR will handle severance. No warning. No conversation. It's just a digital slap to the face. 4 days. That's all I took. 4 days of approved bereavement leave granted by the same executive who'd now had me erased with a single line of cold corporate efficiency. Just below the termination notice, one sentence stood out in bold. We need people who treat work as their top priority. As if honoring my mother's life after 68 years of sacrifice and strength was some selfish distraction from quarterly KPIs. My name is Mark Ellison. I'm 41 years old, and until precisely 7:42 this morning, I was the senior operations strategist for Karen Freight Systems, the largest logistics hub in Columbus, Ohio. I gave everything to that company's 60-hour weeks, holidays missed, relationships sacrificed, and now, for choosing to say goodbye to the woman who raised me alone, I'm being discarded like expired inventory. The office was still empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed above as I sat frozen, staring at the email. My mother's eulogy still echoed in my ears, and now this a digital execution with no chance for dignity. I wasn't just a name on Karen's payroll. I was the engine behind their most profitable division for nearly 7 years. As senior strategist, I rebuilt fractured logistics chains, salvaged high-risk contracts, and transformed underperforming branches into lean, profitable machines. My name was attached to every major success in the Eastern Corridor. But more than that, I built a culture, a team, a second family. We celebrated births and battled through divorces together. We shared late-night coffee before product launches and clinked beers after quarterly wins. My office walls weren't adorned with corporate awards. They were covered in sticky notes from junior analysts thanking me for mentoring them and candid photos from warehouse visits where I worked with crews half my age. There was even a rubber chicken on my bookshelf, an inside joke from my team after I pulled off a cross-country reroute during a snowstorm that saved the company over $2 million. That chicken was more than a gag. It was proof of a bond few departments ever achieve. And yet, all of that, the people, the late nights, the sacrifices meant nothing when I stepped away to mourn the one woman who taught me loyalty. My value, it seemed, had an expiration date, and it ended the moment I chose grief over grinding. I didn't rage. I didn't slam drawers or march down the hall to confront Terrence Morgan, the company's new chief operating officer, who signed the termination line. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, listening to the low hum of the building's HVAC and the muted echo of nothingness in an office that hadn't fully come alive yet. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly as if unsure whether to stay on. I stared at the words again, like they could change if I read them differently. But they didn't. Please vacate your workspace by the end of the day, Mark. A single sentence that erased 7 years. I grabbed my phone, snapped a photo of the email, and forwarded it to my address. Then I stood up and opened the drawer where I kept my things, a steel travel mug from the Denver Logistics Summit, a keychain shaped like a former intern sent Ohio I once promoted, and that damn rubber chicken. I took my time, wrapping each item with quiet reverence, not for the job, but for what it once represented. Half my desk was cleared when others started trickling in around 7:45. Olivia from Data Analytics was the first to notice. "Mark, are you moving?" she asked, stopping mid-sip of her coffee. "I've been let go," I said, flat but firm. She blinked. "You're kidding. Why? You were just in the strategy briefing last week." I held up the email on my phone. Her jaw tightened. "You took 4 days off to bury your mother, and now they're cutting you?" I nodded once. Grief doesn't fit Karen's Q4 timeline. Soon, others gathered quietly at first. Ellis from procurement, Tanya from fulfillment. Then my core team Ben, Erica, Jamal, and Chloe stood stunned, processing the scene like they'd stumbled onto a crime. Erica looked ready to cry. Ben's fists clenched at his sides. You led the DeLuca recovery, Jamal said. Without you, that deal would have collapsed. I didn't respond. What could I say that would make it make sense? And then, as if summoned by tension, Terrence appeared in a Navy suit, polished cufflinks. There is no soul in sight. I need everyone back at their desks, he said, his voice sharp and sterile. There's work to be done. No one moved. Now, he barked. Slowly, reluctantly, my team dispersed, each giving me a glance that said everything corporate silence refused to. Terrence stepped closer. This didn't have to be so public, he said through a clenched jaw. I met his stare. Then you probably shouldn't have fired me by email while I was burying my mother. His lips twitched, but he said nothing. I lifted my box and walked out without looking back. Quiet doesn't mean weak. Sometimes it means precision. The walk to HR felt like a silent execution. No one made eye contact as I passed, just the soft clicking of keyboards and the artificial brightness of overhead LEDs buzzing like a bad omen. When I stepped into the glass-paneled human resources office, everything felt sterile: white walls, corporate-approved artwork, and a potted plant dying quietly in the corner. Behind the desk sat Lena Barlow, HR director, who recently transferred from corporate in Dallas. She looked up, her expression tight but rehearsed, the kind of face that had delivered dozens of terminations and convinced herself they were procedures, not betrayals. Mark, she said, gesturing to the seat across her, I'm truly sorry. She slid a thick folder toward me, severance paperwork, NDA clauses, non-compete reminders. This isn't personal, just unfortunate timing. Timing? I echoed. 4 days to bury my mother, and now I'm obsolete? She cleared her throat and glanced toward the hallway. The directive came from above, executive realignment post-acquisition. The board signed off on department consolidations. Her voice dropped slightly. It wasn't unanimous, for what it's worth. I flipped through the papers, 2 weeks' pay, a waiver, and a 6-month clause forbidding me from working with any direct competitors within 500 miles. Interesting, I muttered. I gave this company nearly a decade, built its Midwest operations from nothing, but a 4-day funeral made me dispensable? Lena didn't answer. Instead, she offered a carefully folded sympathy card across the desk. From the department, she said. A few people signed it. I didn't touch it. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the email from Terrence Morgan, and placed it face up between us. This is how it was delivered, I said quietly. No warning, no conversation, just this. Lena's eyes shifted. We didn't know it would come through that way. You didn't know, I repeated softly, but you let it stand. She hesitated, off the record. This isn't right. If you ever choose to take action, I won't. I interrupted, but I won't forget it either. I left the folder untouched, stood up with my box in hand, and gave the HR department one last glance, not of anger, but of clarity, the kind that changes how you walk through the world. As I stepped outside with the cardboard box pressed against my ribs, the chill of early October cut through my coat. Downtown Columbus was already pulsing to life, cars honking, people rushing, the world spinning like nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had. I sat in my car and stared out through the windshield, hands resting on the steering wheel, motionless. For the first time in over a decade, I had nowhere to be on a Monday morning. That thought hit harder than the termination itself. Not because I feared unemployment, but my identity had been entangled in the grind meetings, metrics, momentum for so long. Now it was just silence. My phone buzzed a photo. My mom and I were at the reservoir last fall. She wrapped her arm around me, eyes squinting from the sunlight, wearing that ridiculous floppy hat I used to make fun of. I could still hear her voice as we stood by the water's edge that day. Mark, she said, tapping the side of her head, the current will always try to carry you, but baby, don't let it sweep you away. You've got to anchor yourself. She wasn't just talking about water. She talked about moments like this, when the world forgets your humanity and companies replace loyalty with spreadsheets, when you're punished for loving someone enough to grieve them properly. And I remembered what she did next. She tossed a flat rock into the water. It skipped 6 times before vanishing. "See that?" she said. "Stillness first, then power." I looked at the phone in my hand, her smile frozen in pixels. I made a quiet promise at that moment. I wouldn't beg to be let back in. I wouldn't waste energy on revenge, but I would rebuild. Not with noise, with intention. And like that rock, I'd move the water without losing my center. That afternoon, I drove aimlessly for hours. Past the reservoir where Mom used to bring her sketchpad, through the old industrial parks where Karen's shipping routes began, and finally to the parking lot of a small cafe off 3rd and McAllister one I hadn't been to in years. I ordered black coffee, found a corner booth by the window, and just Saturday. The box of my belongings sat beside me on the seat, unopened, like a capsule of who I'd been just hours earlier. I didn't text anyone. Not yet. But as I scrolled through my phone, the messages came in anyway. "Olivia, this is insane. We're all shocked. Are you okay? Erica." What happened? We just saw Terrence smirking in a meeting, like he won something. "Ben, tell me this isn't permanent." Each message was another thread pulling at the fabric of what used to be a team. A loyal, tight-knit, overperforming team. They weren't just coworkers, they were proof that you could build something human inside a machine. And Terrence Morgan had torn it down without blinking. But the last message came from someone unexpected. "Mark heard what happened. You free to talk?" Lyle Stanford. Lyle was the VP of Regional Ops at Northbridge Transit Logistics, Karen's top competitor in the Midwest. We'd met at a symposium 2 years ago and kept in casual contact ever since. He had once offered me a position, but I declined out of loyalty. I stared at his message for a long moment before replying. "Free now. Can talk." Within minutes, he called. "Mark," he began. "I'll skip the pleasantries. What did Karen do?" Utterly short-sighted. But honestly, it's not surprising. I've watched Morgan operate like a wrecking ball in a necktie since he left Olitech. I let out a dry laugh. "Sounds familiar. I won't waste your time. Northbridge is opening a regional command center in Dayton. We need someone who knows how to lead, scale, and retain talent without bleeding people dry. I've already spoken to legal about your non-compete. Given the terms of your dismissal, we're confident it's not enforceable." I leaned forward. "Even with the 500-mile clause. Our legal counsel says it's overly broad and abusive in context, especially since you were terminated for taking bereavement leave. That opens an entirely different legal angle if Karen pushes it." I took a breath. "I'm not looking to sue." "Didn't think you were," he said. "But I am offering you a chance to build something from the ground up. Real resources, full control of your team. You pick who you trust." That last line stopped me. "You pick who you trust." I looked at the unopened box beside me. Inside was that ridiculous rubber chicken, my lucky desk mug, and a framed photo of my team crammed into a cargo van during a cross-state warehouse audit. We'd slept 3 hours, delivered the project early, and laughed the entire way home. "I'll need until Monday," I said finally. "You've got it." "And Mark?" "Yeah?" "We don't just want your title, we want your leadership." After the call, I stepped out into the cool evening air. The sun was setting behind a row of leafless trees, painting long shadows over the cracked asphalt. I wasn't just considering a new job. I was standing at the threshold of a new architecture entirely. That night, I called Ben and Erica, then Jamal, then Chloe, one by one. I didn't make promises. I didn't lure. I just listened. And what I heard wasn't just frustration, it was disillusionment. "No one's filled the DeLuca files," Ben said. "They don't even know where you stored the asset sheets." "Terrence tried to assign me your entire pipeline," Erica said. "No extra pay, no extra title. They revoked our flexible hours." Jamal added, "Said alignment requires sacrifice. Whatever the hell that means." I met them all 2 nights later at a brewery near German Village. Nothing formal. No agenda. Just beer, honest talk, and a battered legal pad I kept flipping open. "I've got an offer," I finally said. "Northbridge. They want me to build a new command unit in Dayton. It's a blank slate." The table went quiet. Erica leaned forward. "You going?" "I think so." Ben looked around. "Would they be hiring?" I smiled. "You'd all need to apply, but I'll vouch for you. I won't build anything without loyalty at its core." Jamal raised his glass. "To start over. But smarter this time." I clinked my glass against his. This wasn't revenge, not in the traditional sense. This was a reclamation of purpose, trust, and dignity that Karen tried to delete with one cold email. By Thursday morning, whispers had already spread through Karen Freight's regional office. Terrence's decision had sparked more than discomfort. It had ignited something quieter, deeper. A slow brewing storm. One that didn't shout but observed, waited, and then moved. That day, I met Chloe and Erica for coffee at Milo's Bean House. Just far enough from Karen HQ to avoid prying eyes. Chloe showed up in scrubs. She had taken a temp contract in healthcare logistics just to breathe, she said. Erica looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. She ordered an espresso and downed it like water. "Something's shifting," Chloe said. "People are talking. It's not just about what happened to you. About how they're all afraid now." Erica nodded. "Morgan's walking the halls like he's daring someone to speak up. But no one trusts him. Your leaving didn't just hurt them, it exposed the cracks." I pulled out my phone and showed them a draft proposal I'd been working on with Lyle Stanford and Northbridge's executive team.org. Structure, chain of command, and hiring schedule. "We start in 3 weeks," I said. "And we need a team ready to launch." Lyle gave me full autonomy to build it. Chloe leaned in. "Do you want us?" "I want people who value clarity over chaos, loyalty over ego, ownership over blame." Erica smirked. "So, us." Later that night, the group chat we used to call Freight Club lit up jokingly. Jamal sent a message first. "I'm out. Just handed in my resignation." Then Ben, same, effective immediately. HR was speechless. Within 24 hours, 5 of my former team members had walked out. No scene, no theatrics, just calm, calculated exits, each one like a silent alarm ringing through Karen's polished corridors. On Friday, I received a text from Lyle. "HR at Northbridge just received 6 applications from your former team. We're reviewing it immediately. Interviews start on Monday. Your people move fast." I smiled to myself. They weren't my people by contract anymore. They were my people by choice. That weekend, we met again at a rented conference space inside a co-working hub downtown. No beers. No distractions. Just a whiteboard, markers, and a new beginning. "We're not just joining another company," I said. "We're building a better system. One that remembers people are the engine, not the afterthought." Chloe picked up a marker and drew a circle. "Then let's start right there." And with that, we began sketching the future together. It started with an email from Gina Patel, Karen's director of client retention. Subject line, "Urgent. Wilson contract concerns." I almost deleted it without reading it, but curiosity won. Inside, her message was polite but frantic. "Mark, please confirm whether you are involved with the Wilson Logistics renewal. They're threatening to pull out unless someone from your former team is reinstated to manage the account. They specifically mentioned your name." I didn't reply. An hour later, my phone rang. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Then again, this time I picked up. "Mark." It was Nora Henley, Karen's regional vice president for the Midwest, a name I hadn't heard in months. She hadn't spoken a word the day I was dismissed, just nodded silently from the end of the boardroom table. "I assume you've heard what's going on." Her voice had that tone measured, diplomatic, careful. It is the tone of someone realizing they might have backed the wrong horse. "I have," I said flatly. Look, she continued, Terrence made that call without regional approval. I only learned of your termination after the fact. I want to be clear, I never would have allowed it. And yet, it happened. She exhaled. It was a catastrophic mistake. And now we're paying the price. The Wilson account is worth $12.6 million annually. If they walk, it'll trigger a review of our entire Northeast portfolio. That doesn't just affect our numbers, it affects our valuation. There it was, the money. I'm sorry that this is how we're reconnecting, she added. But Mark, we'd like to offer you your role back, senior strategist, with a 20% raise and a public apology if that matters. I looked across my desk at Northbridge's early-stage org chart, my name at the top, 7 lines branching out beneath it. All is filled now. I'm already leading a new division, I said. Full autonomy. No, Terrence. We'll match whatever Northbridge is paying plus equity. It's not about money, Nora. Then what would it take? I paused, letting the weight of silence do the work. It would take time travel, I said. Going back to when I was sitting at my mother's funeral, and someone at Karen chose to act like a human being instead of a spreadsheet. She was quiet. Then, softer. I know you have no reason to believe this, but there are people at Karen who value what you built. People who miss your leadership. That's good to hear, I replied. But I'm not coming back. Oh, then at least tell me, are the rumors true? You're building a team at Northbridge. I didn't answer. She already knew. 6 of your people walked out in 3 days, she said. We're scrambling. Clients are asking questions. Wilson's threatening legal action, and Morgan, he's disappeared. Took personal leave right in the middle of this mess. I leaned back in my chair. Sounds like a culture problem. She laughed bitterly. That's one way to put it. I've got a meeting to get to, I said. Of course, thank you for taking the call. As I hung up, I felt no rush of triumph, no glee, just clarity. I wasn't chasing revenge. I had refused to stay where I wasn't respected. And now, the silence I had chosen that day in HR was speaking louder than any protest ever could. By the end of that week, Karen had lost the Wilson contract. Word traveled fast in our industry, and within days, Price Distribution and Velmore Packaging, 2 legacy clients I had onboarded years ago, reached out to Northbridge directly. They wanted to move their business. Mark, Lyle said, poking his head into my new office. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. They're calling you the team that doesn't burn bridges, they build highways. I smiled. It wasn't about taking down Karen anymore. It was about building something that made their model obsolete. Still, some things caught up. On Monday morning, a quiet message arrived from an internal contact still at Karen, someone I'd mentored years ago. Morgan was placed on administrative leave. There's a formal ethics investigation underway. Your termination violated internal protocols. Nora's been pulled into damage control mode. I stared at the screen, then typed one line in response. Tell them this. I didn't break anything. I just stopped holding it together. And that was the truth. The collapse wasn't my doing. It was inevitable. I'd just chosen to walk out before the roof fell. By the following Thursday, it wasn't just rumors anymore. Karen Freight's corporate board released a formal memo. Effective immediately, Terrence Morgan has been placed on indefinite leave pending review of executive conduct, policy violations, and client disruption. No press release, no public apology. It was a quiet internal shuffle to save face while the walls buckled, but the industry noticed. By week's end, 2 more of Karen's regional managers had resigned, citing misalignment with evolving leadership values. A polite way of saying, this ship is going down, and we're not going with it. Meanwhile, over at Northbridge's temporary Dayton office, things were moving fast. Lyle and I had finalized the new division structure. I now had a full-time executive assistant, an operations analyst, and a digital onboarding suite built from scratch. It felt strange being trusted with so much after being discarded so easily just weeks before. But the real win came Friday morning. After officially terminating its contract with Karen, Wilson Logistics signed a 3-year exclusive deal with Northbridge. The email hit my inbox at 9:02 a.m. I just stared at it for a minute. No fist pump. No celebration. Just a quiet exhale. Then came the ripple effect. Price distribution, which had once accounted for 18% of Karen's Eastern Corridor revenue, followed suit. Velmore Packaging entered negotiations. Within 72 hours, we were fielding more inbound requests than we could process. We had to pause interviews to recalibrate our growth strategy. "You understand what this is, right?" Lyle said, stepping into my office later that afternoon. "This isn't just talent transfer. This is cultural migration. People aren't leaving Karen because of pay. They're leaving because they finally saw what leadership looks like when it's done right." I nodded, though part of me still carried the weight of what it had taken to get here. That evening, I received a small hand-delivered package. No sender name. Inside was a familiar object, the rubber chicken that had once lived on my desk back at Karen. It had been quietly passed around the office over the years like a symbol of resilience. There was a note. No signature. Just a single line. Some things were never theirs to throw away. I placed it on my new shelf. Northbridge wasn't perfect. No place ever is. But here, we weren't pretending people were interchangeable. We weren't punishing grief or rewarding arrogance. We were building with clarity, with intention, and finally, with the power to shape the rules ourselves. 3 months after I signed my contract with Northbridge, our new division surpassed every metric in the playbook. Client retention, 97%. Staff attrition, 0. Revenue growth, 32%. We weren't just rebuilding, we were thriving. Our new space in downtown Dayton had opened just 2 weeks earlier. It was smaller than Karen's towering glass fortress, but pulsed with energy. People stopped by each other's desks to check in. Whiteboards were covered in ideas instead of directives. Laughter was not a disruption, it was part of the air. On a gray Thursday morning, I entered the office to find balloons tied to my chair and a sheet cake sitting on the communal table. The frosting read, 3 months of freedom, one hell of a future. Erica lit a sparkler and held it like a birthday candle. "You all are ridiculous," I said, chuckling. Ben grinned. "You rebuilt this place from scratch, Mark. Let us be ridiculous." Ugh. We gathered around, coffee mugs raised instead of champagne flutes. Jamal cleared his throat, tapping his cup like it was a mic. "Here's to building something where we're not just tools on a balance sheet, where our ideas matter, and where nobody gets punished for being human." Everyone clinked mugs. I said nothing at first, just took in the room. The people who once stood stunned beside my desk are now leaders of their domains. Chloe had just closed her first solo contract. Erica had launched a mentorship initiative across all 5 Northbridge hubs. Jamal was already slated to speak at an industry conference in Chicago. And then there was me, there no longer chasing titles and building what should have existed all along. Later that day, I entered my office to find a small brown envelope on my chair. No name, no handwriting, just folded neatly and sealed. Inside was a photo I hadn't seen in years, me and my mom, standing in front of my first Karen office, the day I got promoted to senior strategist. She wore a deep red scarf, wind-blown and laughing, holding up 2 thumbs like she owned the world. Tucked behind the photo was a handwritten note. She'd be proud. We all are. Again, no signature. I stared at that photo for a long time. That night, I drove back to the reservoir just outside Columbus, where Mom used to sketch while I skipped stones across the water. The sun had already dipped below the tree line. The water was still. No wind, just quiet. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small rock. Flat, dark, perfect for skipping. I held it in my hand for a moment. She'd say, "Don't just move the water," I whispered. "Be the reason it changes direction." I threw the rock. It skipped once, twice. Then, it disappeared beneath the surface, not with force, with precision. We hadn't won by shouting. We hadn't burned anything down. We'd outgrown the system that tried to erase us and made it irrelevant by building better. And this time, the current was moving in our favor. 1 year to the day after I was fired, I stood at the front of Northbridge's new Midwest HQ, delivering our first annual strategy address. The room was packed dozens of team leads, department heads, clients, and vendors, all gathered in a wide-open space that had been little more than drywall and blueprint sketches just months earlier. Behind me, the new division metrics glowed on the screen. 4 major client acquisitions. The retention rate holds steady at 98%, and an employee satisfaction score that stunned even the most skeptical investors. But those numbers weren't what mattered most. What mattered was what happened after the meeting. As the room cleared, people lingered laughing, connecting, offering ideas without fear. Chloe approached, holding a tablet. "I want to run a cross-state mentorship exchange," she said. "Pair newer reps in Dayton with our more experienced crew in Chicago. Build upward loyalty." "Draft a plan," I replied. "Let's do it." Moments later, Lyle Stanford pulled me aside. He clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "The board wants you to represent the region at the National Ops Conference next quarter. Full keynote. You game?" I gave a slow nod. "Yeah, I think I'm ready." That evening, I stayed behind after everyone had gone. I walked the halls alone, past whiteboards full of client journey maps, and past framed photos of the team at our opening day ribbon cutting. In the break room, someone had tacked up a sketch of a boulder in the middle of a stream, water rushing around it. Underneath, a quote, "Stillness isn't weakness, it's structure." I didn't ask who drew it. I didn't need to. On the drive home, I took the long way past Karen's old Columbus headquarters. The building was still there, lights on, but it looked different now. Smaller, like a place I'd already outgrown. There are a few new names on the sign out front. A fresh coat of paint, but the same foundation. Word had it the company was undergoing a philosophical rebrand. Leadership training, mental health initiatives, exit interviews from the past 5 years were being reviewed. I even heard Nora Henley had quietly stepped down from her role, taking a position at a nonprofit focused on ethical leadership in logistics. I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. You don't need to destroy what hurt you. You need to stop feeding it. The next morning, I received a lunch invite, an unfamiliar name attached. "Ethan Morales is a new division lead at Karen." The message read, "I've heard a lot about what you built. I'd love to learn how you led through it. Not as a Karen exec, just as someone who wants to lead better." I paused, then replied, "Meet me at Milo's on the 3rd, Tuesday, noon. If we want better systems, we must teach them what better looks like." That weekend, I drove back out to the reservoir again. Same place, same time, sunset. This time, I brought the photo of my mother, the one from the envelope. I sat on the same bench where she used to rest her sketch pad, the red scarf in that picture fluttering faintly in my memory. I didn't speak out loud, just breathed, just was. The truth is, I never imagined it would all turn out this way. That being cast aside would open more doors than staying ever could. That silence, dignity, and patience would move more power than any lawsuit, protest, or revenge campaign. I thought about the people I now led, not because they had to follow, but because they chose to. I thought about the companies we'd left behind and the ones we were building anew. I thought about the next time someone got discarded like I did and how our team might be where they landed so they didn't have to rebuild alone. As the sky turned to amber and the water settled into a mirror, I stood, reached into my coat pocket, and pulled out one more rock. I didn't skip it this time. I just let it fall clean, simple, steady into the water's still surface. No fanfare, no splash. And then I whispered, not to the water, not to the sky, but to the memory of my mother, the sound tucked inside me. "We did it your way, quiet, clear, unshakable." Sometimes the loudest moves don't echo through boardrooms or go viral on social media. Sometimes, the fundamental shift happens when you choose not to fight the fire with more fire, but with clarity, boundaries, and purpose. I didn't scream. I didn't retaliate. I didn't write a takedown post or try to expose anyone. I stepped away from what no longer valued me and built something better with people who believed in something more profound than profits. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: you are allowed to grieve and still be powerful. You can walk away with your dignity instead of staying to prove a point. And you can choose yourself even when it costs you comfort. Because what you build in silence, when grounded in integrity, will outlast anything built on fear. Not every betrayal needs revenge. Some need redirection. And if you ever find yourself on the other end of a cold email, a closed door, or a quiet dismissal, I hope you remember what I remembered. You are not what they discard. You are what you rebuild next. And sometimes, the most unshakable power is the kind that never had to raise its voice.